a second then.
Of course.
And we're live now, Ian.
And
Hi. Just wait a second then. Okay, so welcome everybody to this morning's online sharing good practice. From wherever you are in the UK, I hope the snow is not causing you too much problems. Sharing good practice. And apologies that we weren't able to all get together in London on this occasion. Too much problems. Sharing good practice. What we're going to do is go through a series of presentations. We have Ian Phillips from the ISC Digital Strategy Group with us. We'll have Des O'Connor joining us from Hanscross Park about 10 to 11. Matt Dunn from Yarm School will be joining us just after 10 past 11 to talk about computational thinking. Laura White from St. Catherine's School on Google Tools for Critical Thinking will be around about 11:30. Paul Farrell from C Learning is going to talk to us about creating custom maps just before 12 o'clock. And then to finish the day, this session, Ronan McNichol from Sevenoaks will be coming on to share with us some ideas about virtual reality. You can, during the course of today, join the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag ISC_sharing. And by the side of your screen, you should have a chat box. And if you have any questions, then please just post those questions in the chat box, and we will pass them on to the speakers so we can get the answers to your questions. So at this,
Ian, can I just interrupt for a second? Ian Phillips has now joined us, and he's live online, ready to start.
Yeah. Okay. So Ian, do you want to sort of pick up the presentation?
Yes. Can I make sure that you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Fine. Fantastic. So it's the 10th year for the ISC Digital Strategy Group, which is an amazing thing, and 9 conferences, and it's just been such a privilege to be able to do this. You'll see on the screen there's the hashtag and the 2 that we're using there. We're going to use obviously ISC Digital is our name, and we're going to use ISC sharing as well, which is great. And we will be posting any resources that we find useful today on the ISC Digital site. But if you have anything that you feel would be valuable to share, then that's a fantastic thing, and we'll get on with that.
Just say next slide, Ian, and I'll move it forward.
Yeah, yeah, next slide. Thank you. The idea of creating learning networks is really, really important to me. And what we do to build these and reduce our workload while still improving our preparation of our youngsters for their future is not only important, but it is urgent. The aim of the ISC group at the moment is to share what we see as good practice and how good relationships with each other, that's with educators, and also our relationships with edtech companies, and how that is impacting on student learning and helping us to get the best out of our investment in education. Please use the hashtags today. And the big question is how, if we're going to improve, if we're going to do more, if we're going to do it better, how can we possibly make it easier for us? Because we all know teachers' workload is at an all-time high. There's the ISC Digital Twitter, and please do use that today. Next slide. So This is the question, isn't it? We have to really use the methods of tomorrow rather than the methods of the past. And the challenge for us is to move beyond thinking of technology as a tool. Instead, we need to think about how to nurture students' ability and confidence to excel both online and offline in a world where digital media is ubiquitous. We have to help students to be able to make the right choices. Now, the amazing thing about this is that all we really have to do is we have to show students how we make the right choices of when and when best to use technology to enable them to be able to see what we do. And so if we model good practice, they'll be able to do the same. Okay, next slide. I wanted for a moment for you to consider what is your favorite use of technology at the moment. Last year in our ISC digital conference, we made it clear that now, as technology is ubiquitous, we need to be more ambitious in how we achieve sharing good practice and developing these relationships I've just talked about. We talked about how the digital school of the future is preparing students, how employment and recruitment have changed beyond recognition, and the skills that we need to empower our students with is curiosity and creativity so they can solve problems in this automated world, to become the global citizens, innovators, and entrepreneurs. And the question is for us as educators is how we make this easier, because we can't make it any harder. Our time is finite. And the secret to this, I believe, is collaboration. I believe that in collaboration with teachers, with edtech companies, and as schools collaborate, we can increase what we do, and we can also increase the impact of what we do. I have a question that I wanted to ask everyone at this point, which was, what is your highlight of the last year? And I've put that into the messaging on the side. So if anyone's got any highlights in the last year that they'd like to share, that would be wonderful to share that now. And while you're thinking about that, the other thing I'd like you to share is, what are you hoping to get from today? It's a real shame we can't all be in London together face to face to be able to do this. The question is, what were you hoping to get from today? Okay, so as we move on, if we can now still think about those things, and if you've got any highlights, then please do share those now. So, teacher workload. The question is, what is working? And I'm sure a lot of you are aware of Hattie's work. Hattie's done a tremendous amount of work where he's been looking at what are the major impact on student progress. And if you can see down the list there, peer tutoring, that's students working together, 0.5. That means the progress of half a year. Direct instruction, 0.59, equally valuable. Self-questioning, feedback, 0.7. We move up to deep learning, where we give students deep immersive experiences like the ones we've been given in virtual reality, where there's an effect size of 1 academic year. And look what's right at the top. Teacher collaboration. We need to work together. When I was in High Tech High a couple of years ago, looking at what was the significant factors within that establishment that were making the big difference, everyone felt that the collaborative environment where teachers supported each other was making the most significant factor. And Hattie, in his research, has been able to quantify that in this way. If we look at the next slide, we'll see that as we move forward and we collaborate as teachers, there is still an issue over teacher workload. And clearly, these three factors of students becoming independent learners, students working collaboratively, and more learning progress and less teacher workload will all have an impact to empower students, make them responsible, increasingly responsible for their learning, and at the same time allow teachers to be more creative and do more. And clearly this is a significant step forward rather than the instructions we normally get, where we're all expected just to do a little bit more with the next initiative. This initiative is about sharing more responsibility with the student, and as a result of that, the students benefiting twice and staff benefiting. If we could now move on to the next slide, and we'll see that I've got some ideas on how we can collaborate and therefore reduce the amount of work. So we've created a new website in which we're offering teachers, educators, and edtech companies to help us to develop the resources to make teachers' lives easier, to help you become better decision makers making technology, and help you to know when the best time to use technology and not to is. And as a result of that, you can model that for the students. We're not going to try and recreate the TES. We're not going to try and recreate Microsoft. All we're going to do is aggregate what we see are the best resources here so that people can share what we've done. Paul Curzon is a great guy he's a university lecturer from Queen Mary University, London. And Paul said, if everyone does one thing well and shares it, that would make a significant impact on teaching and learning across this country. And so we're trying to take that one step forward and create an environment within which everyone can share what they see as best practice, and therefore that could hopefully make a big difference to everybody. And we'll host it on the website. If we can go to the next slide, and here, this is a model by which we've been embedding computational thinking. There's a lot of talk about computational thinking, and I know that's going to be spoken about later. This is a model from Barefoot that I've been sharing with everyone across the world, and I can't believe the impact it's having. It's very simple, very simple. And as a result, we've put this into the homework diaries of all our students, so they can actually see the value of these individual skills and these processes and how these can have an impact on student learning, particularly when this is joined up across the school. And as you'll see in the next slide, students agree with this. I was going to share a film with you, but as I think we're doing this online, we all want to make sure this all works. And what the students feel is they feel that learning in this way is empowering for them. It gives them more responsibility. And these boys I've been working with for the last 2 years in this way, and I'm just preparing them now for their GCSE, their IGCSE in computer science. And the boys are really doing well. Not only are they developing the right skills, but more, they're actually in a position now where they can achieve the exam results they want. Okay, I've just got one last slide now. So if we can put that on the screen. Okay, and so in this slide, once in a while, there's a convergence, and this is the time. This is what Fulton said. This is the time. And please do get involved. Please do get involved in this. You can message me here. You can get through to me through my Twitter account @Ian Habs, or you can actually go on to our school website, the isedigital.co.uk, and you can contribute to this ongoing process. Thank you very much, everybody.
Ian, thank you very much for that. That's a great start to the online conference. Ladies and gentlemen who are in the audience, if you have any questions about what Ian has had to say, then while we're getting ready for Des O'Connor and some of the students from Hanscross Park to join us, then please just post any questions you have for Ian in the chat. And Ian, I have one just for you. We see lots of innovation taking place across the sector, whether it's in prep schools or senior schools, and being driven by some amazing teachers. What do you think the challenges for the teaching profession as a whole in terms of supporting them and helping them as a body to move forward?
Yeah, so it's a thing. Oops, I'm not going to do
it. Okay, I think Ian is done. Des, welcome to today's session.
Hello.
And I think we're going to just pass the floor to you, so you should be able to now share your screen and sort of take us through your presentation, which is sort of working collaboratively and working from afar. So do you want to take control of the screen, and the floor is yours.
Okay, so I believe that you should be able to see my Google Classroom as I've shared the screen for that. So my time changed slightly by 10 minutes, so the children aren't actually in lessons yet, but hopefully we'll get to see them. What I'd just like to talk to everyone about is how we sort of build up our work collaboratively within our sort of Google Classroom and using the G Suite tools, specifically in this case, slides. And this is actually one of my Year 4 classes. And what we did at the start of the year is, in my Google Classroom, we did an individual project, and we were looking at researching and building up a presentation and going through the method of how to build an effective presentation containing relevant information on a few people. Obviously, as many of you may know, you can actually add all sorts of different types of assignments and resources onto Google Classroom. So as you can see here, we have the instructions, our learning objectives. And as I scroll down, what I've done is made some guidance videos for the children to follow. And that's for the first slide. So I help them build this first slide, and then they have to use the same methods to create slides for all these other people, these important people in technology. And here is an example of one of the presentations, and different methods here. So they've obviously got the title, they've added images, they've changed the image, they've found and summarized relevant information here. They've had to use bullet points. So this is all the individual side of things and developing the skills. Now down here, what I've done is actually shared each of the pupils' slides with each other for peer review. And what I've done here is allow commenting, but not editing. So indeed, you'll see some of the other pupils here have actually given feedback to each other. So straight away, we're thinking about how we can work together and improving the work. And so that collaboration, that element of collaboration and peer review. And obviously here we have myself giving some feedback as well. So also the skills the children are using is how to use the comment tools effectively. Then from there, this is where we get to the real nuts and bolts of what we're doing collaboratively. So here we then move into a group assignment, and it's actually using the same skills. But what we're trying to do is use the comments tool effectively and working together on the same document at the same time. So in Google Classroom, when you create an assignment, you can obviously make many different assignments and do so for particular students. If you so wish, if you wanted to break it into groups, you could do an individual assignment and just tick it for certain members of your class. But what I found was it was quite difficult to manage that within my Google Classroom because you'd end up with lots of assignments. So what I actually do is make my slides prior to creating the group assignment. And here you can see that all the groups have the people within them, and that's who I've just allowed on my assignment when I actually add a document in. I can actually so if I use this one, for instance, you can set it for students can view file, make a copy for each student, and I've actually set each one for students can edit file. So everyone else eventually will be able to go into each other's slides and again give some feedback and marking and peer review of each other's work. But in the first stage, what this means is that it's very easy for the pupils to access the slides and see what other people are doing, which I think is quite important, and in that we're quite open in what we do. So here we can then see an example of this. So as you see, very similar to the individual work that we did, but these are actually group work. This is actually a group work. So you can see there might be a comment down here. So this person here has put, what else should I do, as they're working. If I click on this one, we can see hopefully a few more comments at the side. Sorry about the loading speed. So here we can see that the pupil has given feedback and instructions to her fellow group member using the comments tool. And the important thing here is that these pupils in all these groups are in both classes of year 4. So not only are they working in real time with each other, with a couple of people from their own group, they're actually working at a separate time as a group in the other half of year 4. So there's one class that I have before break working on this with a couple of members of the group, and then after our break there's the second class of year 4 who are also working on this. So we're really trying to get the children to understand how to work collaboratively in different times, but also at the same time using the comments tool and how that can be used from afar. So I like to get the children to think about, one of you might be in London, one of you might be in Paris, one of you might be in Washington, DC. You could be all around the world, but you can be working at the same time. And it's quite funny because when other teachers come in, they're all very quiet because they're using the comments tool. And when I say we're working collaboratively, they're like, oh, why are they not sat around in a group doing that? Well, it's just because we're trying to get them to work in a different way when we say collaboratively. So here, if I actually click on the comments tool, you'll be able to see all the previous comments that all the different pupils have made. And obviously they're year 4. So at the start, they may have been a bit silly with some of their comments, and we talk about that and how people like yourselves who are watching this now might be able to see silly comments. But you can actually see there's some quite effective feedback, spelling, punctuation and grammar, one there, some effective feedback about the background color. So although obviously in the comments not all our spelling, punctuation and grammar is correct, the working method is there of using the comments tool, resolving them once that is done. So really getting to grips with the idea of working collaboratively. Another part of this is on here, if I click back on our individual, you'll also see this here. So they've given each other lots and lots of feedback on each other's work, and all is that evidence is there for everyone to see. So if inspectors come in, we just get them to click on the comments tool and they see all this work that's been going on collaboratively. And also, don't forget, we have this wonderful version history that we can click on to see exactly who has done what and when on all of these slides. So we can see who has been doing what per the color of the slide. So we can see that Imogen here has been working on this slide, and we can see that obviously who has been doing what throughout. So you can click on the expanded option for each day to see precisely who has done what and when. So obviously that means that we are able to see who is contributing the most, which is really important. As we are working through. Now, another part of this, which I'm hoping the pupils will be getting onto their Chromebook soon, is that I've actually set this class a people in tech review. So this is using something called quizzes, and I'm very hopeful that soon, when they start to log in and they're going to jump straight onto their quizzes, that you can see their progress, and it's reviewing all of their knowledge throughout all this individual work and obviously their collaborative work. So obviously we're now hopefully going to get into the working from afar part. Unfortunately, I'm sort of still going to have to wait for them to log in themselves to actually see what they're doing. Now, when you're working collaboratively and in Google Classroom, the great thing about this is you can always reuse previous posts. And I'm sure many of you have been using this in Google Classroom. So it's really good when you're setting up other pieces of work. And as you can see, I've got some of my old classes here from last year, and I can take whatever assignment I would like to and add it to my new classroom, and I can just tweak and edit, and then obviously add all my new slides that I've made previously. Whilst we're waiting for the class to join, I'm just going to also show you my year 8 class. So they have also been working collaboratively, and this is on digital awareness. Now, the key thing about this is that they're actually using the speaker notes as well and presenting in front of an audience. And the main thing here is we have an emphasis on using the speaker notes. So whereas previously these guys are concentrating on the skills of researching, including hyperlinks back to the source, the year 8s are now moving on through their levels of skill development to think about using speaker notes, all their animations, etc., that they are doing. So here they're partway through, and you can see they're bullet pointing all their speaker notes here. So the skill development, the skill progress, I think is pretty obvious there as we move through. Now, I just want to see if anyone's logged in yet to their quizzes, but they haven't. But quizzes is a great tool in itself, in that you can assign this by pressing on the classroom button amongst other resources. And when you click on that, you can actually select your course and you can choose that course, and then you post it to that classroom. And so this is a homework. So you don't actually need to be with them as they're working through this course. You can see their results as they come up. I might just actually go back. So this is my class, my previous year 4 class, and we can see their scores and how accurately they've been going through, and it gives you a rundown of all the understanding, and it's quite good on the overview as well, so you can quickly see how people have done, and obviously per question. So quizzes is a great little homework tool if you've not come across that. I'm now waiting and in anticipation for people to start getting onto this. So I'm not sure if they're going to be able to get on time before my time is finished, I'm afraid. So I'm not. If anyone would like to ask any further questions, then please do give me an email at doconnor, DOCONNOR @handxpark.com. That's my email. But in terms of collaboration, when you're doing that, I do suggest that you build it up through your classroom, get the skills first of what you're expecting them to do, and then bring in the collaborative aspect. We've even done things where we've collaborated on Google Docs, in this case, with a school in America whilst teaching over a Google Hangout video as well. So we linked together for a few weeks doing that. That was quite exciting. That happened last year. So there's really exciting things you can do in terms of collaboration in our work. And I'm afraid I don't think they are yet logged in, as the lesson only started at 11 o'clock. So no. I probably finished that quite early. Sorry about that.
No, it's Des. It's been perfect. We've got another 7 minutes, so there's time for your students to come and join us. In the chat, the delegates of the teachers have been sort of posting some really sort of interesting questions, and I think you've answered a number of these as you've been going through. So the fact that you're able to share resources through Classroom, and do you find that this working with your colleagues saves a lot of time when you're doing your lesson planning?
Yes. To be honest, we've been doing a lot of work on our schemes of work here lately, and my English teacher actually spoke to our director of studies and said, but all my planning is in my Google Classroom. So it's all down here, and all my objectives and everything are all here in my Google Classroom. So obviously it will never change that you need your actual schemes of work, but it's very interesting that he was saying that, because he's right. All your information should be here. All your learning objectives can be here. So all your planning and evidence, in effect, is all through Google Classroom. What I tend to do in my schemes of work is just link back to my classrooms or link back to the activities. Because if you copy and paste, so if I copied and paste this into the presentation title here, or the assignment title, sorry, if I copied that into a document, it actually just links it straight to the classroom in this particular assignment. So that's a little tip for you there as well. And in terms of covering and working collaboratively, I should have mentioned, you can see I've got another member of staff here, and I've got 2 members of staff here that I can add as co-teachers here, and that's in About, and you can go down and invite other teachers. So in terms of our cover, we're actually encouraged to add the teacher that we can see in our spreadsheet. It's a Google spreadsheet. All our cover is on there, and we're encouraged to add the person covering us as a co-teacher, and then obviously later on we can remove them from the class when we're done with that lesson.
No, that's great. One of the other questions, Des, that's been asked is When you have your students as a whole class, obviously you can allocate the work to them easily through Classroom, but maybe people don't know that these days you can actually select just small groups of students from within a class to allocate work to those separately.
That's where I was showing you about ticking the boxes. When you create an assignment as well, you can actually create your own small little groups. You can actually differentiate your work really well. The method, the issues I have with that sometimes, it's very good, and I do use it in some of my lessons, is for this particular collaborative exercise, it's important that sort of everyone can see each other's work.
Yeah,
absolutely, yes, you can do that.
Okay, no, that's good, because I know that was one of the questions that that people did ask. Have you any experience of using audio feedback to the students through Google Docs or through Google Classroom?
Absolutely. I don't know if people can still see my screen here.
They can do, yeah.
For instance, for today I was supposed to be up in London, obviously. So in my planning, I'd made a cover lesson video for the children to watch, and they're very used to that. In terms of, if I scroll down, I just want to see if I can actually find. So sometimes I don't know if any of these pupils have actually got videos, maybe one of my other class, but I actually do use video feedback. I use Screencastify, great tool. I do pay for the premium one because it gives you just a few extra features and unlimited. So here you can see this particular pupil here, as you can see. So this gives you feedback, and I've actually used another pupil's work as an example, but that's the culture that we're trying to foster here, that we're very open, we reflect, we collaborate here. So yes, and I just put the link in a private comment, so I should have made that maybe a bit clearer, that you actually can add a private comment, so only that pupil is viewing that video here.
Okay, no, that's great. One of the other things that was being discussed in the sort of chat was the use of things like Quizlet and Kahoot for quizzes, alongside obviously some of the Google resources. So whilst a lot of the presentations are concentrating on some of the Google tools, then I guess you also use these other tools as well. Absolutely.
So Quizlet is a very popular one with a lot of our staff, and Kahoot is very popular as well. So we tend to use those three ones mainly. There are other tools out there as well. We also use some online tools such as Sam Learning and eChalk as well, to provide more sort of interactivity on preps and things, and to allow teachers to see feedback. So there are lots of excellent tools, and most of them integrate really well through the API with Google Classroom now. So things are really good on there.
Okay, no, that's great, Des. And while we're just waiting for Matt Dunn from Yarm School to join us, just one last question: have you had any experience of using the text help, the read write or Equatio products?
Okay, read write. We have started to use. At the moment, we have just started to use that in our learning support department more than anywhere else. But yes, it's much better than it had been in terms of integrating with all your Chromebooks, managing all the license. So they've made really big improvements on that. So it's definitely something that we're looking forward to maybe deploying more throughout the school.
Okay, no, that's great. So Des, thank you very much for sort of joining us today, all the way from is it West Sussex or East Sussex? I can never remember.
West Sussex, top of West Sussex, Gatwick, not too far from Gatwick Airport.
Yeah, not too bad. And I hope that Storm Emma doesn't sort of cause too much havoc in your part of the world as it sweeps through. So again, thank you very much for joining us. It looks like Matt has joined the Hangout. So again, on behalf of everybody involved in today's session, thank you very much for sharing your experiences with your students, and have a great rest of the day. And if you could stop your screen share, that would be great.
Thank you.
Okay, so while Des is sort of stopping his screen share, to those watching the presentation, hopefully you found what Des was doing extremely interesting, and we're providing links to Des so you can follow up any of the questions. I'd now like to introduce Matt Dunn. Matt's the teacher of computer science up at Yarm School in the northeast of England. For those who managed to catch a little bit of BBC breakfast television, apparently the BBC television crew were just on the high street, just along from the school, showing all of the snow that was falling, but apparently the cars were still driving. So Matt, if welcome to the session. If you'd like to share your screen with us, then we very much look forward to your talk about developing computational thinking in Key Stage 2 pupils. Over to you.
Super. Just checking that you can hear me. I seem to have an error on my screen at the moment.
Yeah, no, we can hear you fine, Matt. So carry on, Matt. Yeah, you just need to click on the screen that you want to share now.
Okay, super. So I just thought I'd have a chat through sort of developing ideas of computational thinking in Key Stage 2 students. You'll probably hear me refer throughout the talk, principally because I teach mostly in the senior school, and certainly have a history of teaching through the upper school levels. And so my way of thinking is about how we can start to develop some of those key pathways and thought processes that are supporting pupils in prep school, but prepare them properly for when we move through into senior. Not really aware of who's listening in, so I just thought I'd give a very for me, this is the skill of solving problems in a logical manner. And ultimately, what it requires us to do is to break our problem down into constituent parts, and then to solve each one of those individually, which should then build us back up into solving the whole problem when we come together. That essentially is, and a way of starting the pupils to think about how they can actually put that down onto paper, how they can actually put that down into a formal way. And I believe it's the most important aspect of computer science. Certainly from a previous life as working as a developer, the guys that we recruited in who had a firm grasp on computational thinking were usually the much more capable developers. Specifically though a lot of pupils are always doing good things that make up a lot of computational thinking. If we think about methodologies in science, solving sums in math classes, structures and frameworks of writing stories, these are all excellent ways of breaking problems down into individual chunks. We're just not always making it very obvious to pupils that they are thinking in this specified logical way that but certainly not to be the sole driver of what it is that we're trying to achieve. And really to back up the previous talk about collaborative learning is to try and promote that independence in collaborative learning. One thing that I try to encourage the pupils to do is to start to share their documents with other members of the class and with other members of staff and so on, so that they're and to expand confidence of traditional PC-based systems. Certainly, having worked in a number of schools now, one of the things that I have seen quite routinely is pupils are very used to using touchscreens now. They're very used to using bells and whistles, computing systems, and have gotten increasingly more familiar with some of the really fantastic and interesting things that's going on in the subject. But they are and doing a little bit of work in, I suppose, what we would now call the traditional way. There's three key areas that I see: pattern matching, decomposition, and abstraction. And I've got a little app or a little a piece of methodology that addresses each one of these. Pattern matching is quite basic, and you'll see that really there we're just using some of the typical stock apps that we get with the G Suite. Include. So pattern matching, primarily for me, what I try to use is taking an existing cartoon strip. I use Garfield a lot, and you'll see why in a couple of seconds, and getting the pupils to rearrange this into a logical format. So I've taken the various tiles of into slides. Using an individual slide per frame makes it really easy for the pupils to start to rearrange the various slides and to get this into a position where it reads through as a sensible comic once again. We can make this a bit more challenging for them by taking it out and breaking it into a docs format. And essentially here, Word or in docs, it tends to knock about 500 of the things in your page out of line. This is starting to encourage them to develop that resilience to actually move things around, keep working at it, and keep challenging. But it is very much a basic task. It's very much an introductory task, very much something that is getting them to think about pattern matching at quite a surface level. 1978 onwards, which allows people, if they want to have a go at doing this themselves, to create their own out of order comic using either some of the 3-pane solutions, or if we scroll down a little bit, there's quite a few 7-pane versions as well. So it allows them to have a go and develop some of that confidence around cropping images, copying, pasting, and just doing ordinary office-based activities. Stepping on from here and into decomposition, this idea about breaking a problem down into simple logical chunks. My go-to for this quite frequently is the Google Maps app. I really like this. I'm aware that Paul but what I quite like about this app is, firstly, we can create an individual file that we save into our drive. and then we can attach that into our Google Classroom. So it allows us to distribute a copy of this that's made individualized for each pupil. So we can distribute it out, and then they can work on their own version of the map, and allows us to have one central location that all of that to create multiple tasks through the lesson. So the first task you can see, if I center my map a little more sensibly, you can see for my first task, all I've done is created a route, in this case, from Waterloo Station through to an office block. And my task here for the pupils would be to come up with a series of them to do for that is to use either a sheets spreadsheet or to use docs, and just to create a simple list is to come up with some guidance, almost like a list of directions that you get from a sat nav that start to describe this route out to us. Now, invariably, they would start by using street names. If we zoom in enough, we'll find a series of street names that was to populate our list. Now, one of the simplest ways that I found to start to add in a little bit of differentiation for this is then to encourage them to modify, to change their route so that we're not using street names at all. And then we're starting to guide that, for example, from point A, we should take the first road on the left and continue until we get to Union Street. Within this, we're trying to break the whole route. Now, within this, we can start for the more able people to add in a little bit of error handling and error catching. So relating back towards our idea as a topic of computing, but still quite disconnected from writing code, still quite disconnected from producing programs in Scratch, is this idea about being able to add in a little error handling. So, for example, I'm walking straight down this road here, then I am able to say, if you reach, sorry, my mouse is very sensitive. So if you reach, for example, Copperfield Street, then you've gone too far. We should turn around and head back to Union Street. So we can start to build in a little bit of error handling. We can start to build in a little bit of control flow within our decomposed route that allows the pupils when it goes wrong. As a second task, what I've done is I have given the pupils a start point and an end point and nothing more. So I've listed a start point that's just down over Borough Market and an end point by St. Paul's Cathedral. And so for the second point there, what I'd ask them to do is to come up with as many different routes as they possibly can. Try to come up with a short think about the fact that even though we're decomposing this problem into one particular solution, it's not necessarily a catch-all, and that there are many different routes to be able to get from point A to point B. Within this, we can then start to challenge them as whether they can go via a specific landmark, or whether, as I've said, we're able to challenge them to come up with the shortest possible route. But within this, once we've done that, we can easily to anybody else from within our organization, or obviously any other person that we choose to invite. And there I try to encourage the pupils to share their map with an assigned partner within the class, where they can then start to follow their routes and start to challenge to see who can come up with that shortest route between point A and point B. Building on from that collaboration, the third task, what I would ask the pupils to do, I simply a point on the map that they're going to treat as a starting point, and then to ask them to come up with a route to a second point that they don't disclose to their partner. So they give the start point and the route, but they don't actually give the end location. And what I would ask the second partner there to do is to follow that route and see if they actually do get to the right destination. It's trying a logical, decomposed solution to a problem without actually grounding ourselves too firmly in the idea of code. For abstraction, really at this point, we're starting to look about how we can remove extra detail. And it's one of the easiest things I find to try and convey within this to achieve. For this, I use an app called draw.io. And draw.io allows us to create flowcharts quite easily. It gives us a large number of pre-populated shapes that conform to the general flowcharts that we would produce later on in computer science. But what it allows us to do is to produce some really how we make a jam sandwich. It's not particularly onerous, it's not particularly long, but one of the things that it does is it brings in the idea of having inputs where we're getting butter, we're getting jam, we're getting the bread, and it brings in this idea of abstraction around the process of buttering bread. I'm sure that we can all agree that buttering bread is a much more complex process than just writing it. We know that we understand that we have to be able to pick up we can contain that quite complex process within one step on our flowchart. And what I would aim to do at this point would be to give the pupils probably firstly a blank copy of that flowchart and to ask them from a provided list of all of the steps to start to fill this into the logical order, so that they're starting to pick up a little bit of pattern matching from earlier on. They're starting to understand about how this draw.io environment works. The simple extension for us to move on to this is to provide them with a partially completed copy of the flowchart, but to build in the idea of adding in decision making. So this starts to examine earlier on when we were talking through the maps, and we said the idea of directed person. Here we're starting to think a little bit about controlling the flow of our algorithm, and so at this point where we're spreading jam on the bread, we could ask the question, have we successfully spread enough jam on the bread? If we have, then we can move on to placing a slice on top of the other. If we haven't, then we return back and pass through that controlled flow. It's just one of those ways that we can start to seems to be one of the hardest things that they take on board. It's the nature of how we can make a decision and then act on the output of that decision, on the output of that simple question that we're asking ourselves. To take this a step further, ultimately at that point, we can start to get pupils to create their own algorithms and move into lots of the simple algorithms that we ask pupils to create. To take the existing algorithm to make a jam sandwich and actually to abstract that a layer further so that it could be for any filling. It doesn't necessarily have to be for jam. And so at all points through this, what I'm trying to encourage the pupils to find is ways to remove extra detail. If I've written the word jam down as one of my inputs here, do I need to write that down? Can I actually write down the same one? I think for me, whilst I realise I've probably talked and started to wrap up a little earlier than promised, hopefully sort of the three main points that I'd like to add as a takeaway there is that computational thinking certainly doesn't have to involve lines of code. One of the biggest parts of feedback that I've received from prep produce when they're not specifically experienced in producing complex code themselves. It's something that doesn't have to involve that. Google Maps and Draw.io are two really great apps for developing the nature of this problem solving and breaking things down into individual chunks. But for me, the focus very definitely needs to be around collaboration. Both of those apps there support to work together in challenging each other and challenging themselves across computer systems rather than sitting on the same system, to actually be able to come up with things that challenge them.
Matt, many thanks for that amazing presentation. I'm conscious that during your presentation, occasionally bits of your voice faded in and out, but I think from what I'm seeing in the chat, then people have definitely taken away some of the things that you've been sharing. I think there's lots of interest in adapting the use of Google Maps for lots of different aspects of teaching and learning. So thank you very much for that. Just before we hand over to Laura, who I know is waiting in the wings, you obviously have used these tools and these approaches with your Key Stage 2 students at Yarm School. I guess it equally applies to the senior school students. That was one question. And then how have you managed to encourage other teachers in the school to pick up on this sort of computational thinking?
So certainly within the senior school, it's something that over the last a couple of years I've found to be pupils are coming up into the senior school, and this actually is something for me that they haven't necessarily engaged with too fully. So it's been a focus within the pupils effectively, and I'm hoping as a little bit of time goes on that I'll be able to wind this down with the senior school and on some higher end stuff with them. But certainly at the moment we're covering broadly the same topics because those pupils haven't had exposure to this in years previous.
Okay, no, that's great. And in terms of other teachers, sort of building on your practice and using the same approach, how are they getting trained and supported?
Adapter to the Google platform, and certainly within the prep where we have a much smaller staff base, and providing that training and providing that sort of CPD to staff has proved to be much easier. And I think there the rollout has been quite widely accepted, and certainly there's sort of several departments that are starting to look at these tools and how they can adapt that and relate well to multiple different subjects and departments. Within the senior school, just by the very nature of having a much larger staff body, that adaptation has been a little bit slower, but certainly it's starting to come through. And those key departments that have traditionally lent themselves to tech have certainly taken that on board. Geography have embraced much more regularly, as opposed to emailing things across with each other.
Okay. No, again, Matt, that's really good to hear. And again, on behalf of everybody who's sort of joined today's sharing good practice event from across the country, thank you very much for sharing those ideas. and I'm sure that it's got people thinking about how they can make and create jam sandwiches using Google Draw. I look forward to my next visit to Yarm to see jam sandwiches of perfection. I'm sure it'll be great to see. So thank you again. Have a great rest of the day. And now I'd like to invite Laura Laura White from St. Catherine's School. Laura's the digital learning coordinator there, and I've had the pleasure to listen to Laura before, talking about lots of things, especially around the use of Google tools. And so Laura, I understand you're in school, in class. So I'm going to hand the floor to you, so you can talk about Google tools for critical thinking. If you'd like to share your screen, the floor is yours.
Morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can do.
Perfect, and I'm hoping you can now see my screen. First of all, apologies, I'm in a classroom. There are students around, so there may be a bit of background noise. Like many people today, we've actually got a snow day, which means that we're having to rearrange some classes and things, so there's a lot going on. Can you see the slide, the blue slide? I'm hoping so. So what I'd like to do is bounce you out to a website with some activities, because I'm hoping to actually get some people working today. So if you click the link on my presentation slide there, the bit.ly link, bit.ly/London18, it should take you out to my presentation slides, so you'll be able to see what I'm doing and hopefully join in, which would be rather lovely. So there's my slide. You've got the presentation link up at the top. It's on the first few slides, so it gives you a chance to catch up. So primarily my focus with the Google tools is on developing students' thinking as much as possible. And I'm using the core Google Apps Suite as much as possible, keeping things simple, but just developing some useful skills. My context is I work in a really lovely girls' school in Surrey. I mainly work with the senior and the older girls, but the work that I do also covers the practical girls as well. So we have them from the age of about 4 and 5, beginning to use devices for their learning. The whole focus of what we're doing here is on trying to build this kind of criticality around the use of the tools. So we're calling it digital intelligence, this ability to be open to tools and use them critically and engage them critically, so they're not, they're using their lesson time really, really well. The base tools we use are the remote thinking tools. Most of you will have seen these thinking hats before, I believe. But we are more focused on core skills, which is a set of tools specifically around developing activities.
Laura, if you've got your tab open, can you just switch from the main deck to your actual screen?
I think I am. So is everyone on the APC slide?
Not yet. We can see on the actual sort of main YouTube screen your blue Google Tools for Critical Thinking, but they can't click on the screen to get to the bit.ly. So if you could just, if you could just switch to your tab to your bit.ly presentation.
Okay, I believe I am presenting from there, but let me know if everybody can see it.
It should just come through in a couple of seconds.
Okay, I'll go a bit slower, sorry.
It's all right.
Let me know when you can see the slide, which is white, which is APC, alternatives, possibilities, and choices.
Okay.
No joy?
Yeah, no joy at the moment. It's still showing the sharing good practice one.
Okay, that's strange. All right, well, let's see. So what I'd really like to do is get people doing activities with me, which would be great to have them within my presentation slide. I'm wondering whether that's a more successful route. Does that work?
No, we got a couple of the delegates are on it. So thank you, Claire, for letting us know, and thank you, Miss Brunning. So yeah, some of the people are on it. So
okay,
just carry on then.
Yeah, so if we leave the link up somewhere, which is the do you want to put the link into the chat for me, Ian, which is bit.ly/LON18?
Yeah,
I'll
Paul,
put that
Paul's
link.
done that.
Yeah, links in there already.
Fantastic, thanks very much. Okay, so I've moved on to talking about the court thinking skills, which is just a set of thinking tools. There are lots of different sets. Schools make their selection. We're working with these because we like them. They help students to cultivate breadth. So my plan in the next sort of 15 minutes or so is just to do some thinking activities with you using the Google tools, so you get a flavour of it, and you're very welcome to make copies of the activities and take them away and adapt them for your own environments. So the ABC one is a bit of fun, and it's going to be very appropriate for today. If you're in the slide deck, if you click on the hyperlink for the APC down here, it should open you up into the APC document. So it'd be nice to see the document populating with tags. There we go. I've got a couple already popping up there. Anonymous and Peter, well done. Hello. Okay, so this is an example. What we would do with our students is say, okay, the obvious answer to this question is X, but actually I want you to come up with alternatives, possibilities, and choices. Hello, Anonymous Moose. Well done. Tiger. Everybody's joining me. So under the example, we're going to say we have to get to the conference today, but we have no car. We've lost our wallet and our phone. What can we do? What alternatives, possibilities, and choices do you have? And you can only add a new alternative, possibility, or choice beneath it if it's different. Well done. Somebody's after filling a list. I'm going to let's have a minute on this task. Let's have as many alternatives, possibilities, and choices as we can. I'm going to just go with what Ian has said. Nice. It's a nice alternative. Say well done. Asking for money. Good. So we can see by taking away the obvious selection and forcing students to consider the alternatives, the possibilities and choices, we're generating some creative thinking and some critical thinking. So this is a nice feature of Google Docs, which is this collaboration tool, and it's really nice to see us being able to use this through the Hangout remotely, which I think is giving us a pretty good test of its capabilities. We're able to interact with each other, even though we're all in different places, and interact simultaneously. I'm not quite sure of the participants what your experience is with Google Tools, but if you haven't seen the collaboration features of Google Docs before, this should give you a really good kind of insight into that. Awesome. Okay, let's go back to the main presentation and just look at that again. So APC is finding the alternatives, the possibilities, and the choices. And we've used Google Docs, the collaboration features of Google Docs, to encourage students to work together, to read each other's answers, to develop that criticality. This would be the kind of assignment I would set through Google Classroom. And obviously it's using Google Drive as its back end. Should we try something else? Okay, I'm going to do past CAF example. PMI. So PMI is another thinking tool. It involves asking students to think of the positives, the negatives, and the interesting points about any given topic. And again, the Google Docs, collaboration, classroom, we can even use the ask a question feature in Google Classroom to do this. So again, I'd just like to invite you to pop down to the PMI link here and join me in that PMI document. So we've got a proposal here that all new car drivers should be legally required to ride a bicycle for 6 months as part of their driver training. And again, I said students, right, you've got 60 seconds. What do you think? Try and come up with the positive, the negative, and the interesting ideas here. And again, if you just want to add a row to the table, if you're running out of space, that's fine.
No, on the actual thing, it just says please use the following documents.
Nice work. Well, yes. So you are now engaged in processes of critical thinking. So rather than leaping to the immediate conclusion you might have taken on seeing that question, I'm encouraging you to approach it from other angles. And certainly working with children, they're very quick to jump to an outcome that they expect. And this is just encouraging them to maybe see things from other perspectives, which is a really useful thing for our young students to develop, and even our older students as well. If this is some example you want to take away, feel free to pick up the link down the bottom here, which takes you to more information on PMI. You're also always very welcome to select the file menu and make your own copy so that you can take it away. Some excellent points of view coming up here. Well done. Okay, let's pop back to our original document. So, little tip here is to actually include the PMI matrix, the 3 columns there ready, which speeds up the collaboration. If you just ask the question and give them like a Google document, it's very difficult for students to kind of structure, particularly if they're collaborating, who writes where and how it all goes. So I have a slide here for each of the de Bono court thinking tools, but I'm not going to use them all because it wouldn't be very interesting, but you will have these resources afterwards, so you're welcome to explore them further. It's interesting listening to the previous presentation using slides of computational thinking. I've got a very similar example. If you pick up the slides tab, the reason you're going to get to make a copy will become clear, because you will now be working in your own individual copy as opposed to the master copy, so you won't see the tags for everybody else's collaboration here. Now, similarly, this is about sequencing, similar to the computational thinking. But if we click this grid view here when we share the document, it effectively gives us a slide sorting activity. The consequence and sequel thinking tool is about trying to imagine what comes next, or thinking if this, then that. So we can give this kind of to our students and ask them to kind of figure out, where should these slides go to be in the correct sequence. We can do it here in the slide sort of view, bottom left, or we can ask them to do it here, whichever is going to be the most useful. If anyone's not aware of the force copy function, when you give the sharing link, if you add a kind of / copy onto the end of the sharing link, it means that when the document is created, when the link is followed to the document, it's instantly creating an individual copy. If you're using Google Classroom, you can obviously do that directly in the share stream. That's another nice example of consequence and sequel, which is obviously linking nicely to that computational thinking example previously. Let's keep going. A couple more activities to do. I'm going to skip over this one, I think, and come to I want to come to this one. Okay, let's use this one. So, aims, goals, and objectives. This idea of using Google to develop criticality is really, really helpful because our students do find this incredibly difficult. They don't know how to assess a website. And so what I might do is ask them to use this aims, goals, and objectives tools to look at a website and to try to identify, do some fact checking, and see the objectives. The website that I've got here is a really objectionable one. It's one that I really hate. And so the reason I'm giving you a screenshot of it rather than a link to it is I don't want to give them any extra clicks. And also similarly, if you're working with young children, you might not want to give them the link to a website that you think is questionable. You might want to give them an image of it. If you need to take a screenshot, that's how you can do it. So we click on this AGO example, the aims, goals, and objectives of this website. Welcome, I can see Anonymous Sheep already joined. A few others coming through now. So this would be a kind of task I would give to my students. Again, I'm using Google Docs, but I'm also combining it with other kinds of teaching. So looking at the image below, what can you identify about the aims and goals and objectives of this website? I have intentionally not given you the link to explore this site further. What can you tell about it only from this image? So we're giving limited information and we're asking students to evaluate. So down here again, I've included the matrix already, which makes that collaboration faster and smoother. And I'm asking students to try and identify the aims and give evidence for their view of these things. Feel free to have a go at this website. So it's not a good one. And if I was using this with my students, I'd be asking them to be really quite specific. What can you see here? Obviously, this particular example wouldn't be suitable to use younger students. This would be a more appropriate senior example, but I'm sure you've got examples that younger students can see. what is it about the site that tells us? So we're really trying to encourage that critical view. So our students can determine relevant and irrelevant information, useful and non-useful information, and understand bias. And kind of, particularly in the fake news climate in which we live at the moment, it is really important for students to understand these things. Yeah, there we go. Well done. Anonymous Novel, you're on the case, good job. Okay, I'm going to pop back to my presentation tool. Again, the FIP task is really nicely done in Google Slides with that slide sorting task, working out what has to happen first, that kind of sequencing and storytelling element. And there are examples for each one of these of things you might do. OPV is really probably one of the most powerful thinking tools, and it's something that Google can really support us to develop in students. OPV is this awareness of other people's views, the ability to move out of your own viewpoint, to consider the views of others involved. And actually a really nice Google tool that isn't that widely known is Google News. And it's fantastic for, again, for older students, but if you have students in your school from multiple nationalities, you can select your edition. So at the top here, I'm able to see, I live in the UK, but I'm interested to see perhaps what France is saying about a news issue. And I can look for French editions, but I can select the language to be English or French. And I'm able just to compare the same story, even just asking students to look at what is the top story in different countries and why they think that might be. It's a lovely little Google tool that really deserves to be better known than it is. Obviously for language teaching, you've instantly then got great examples of native language as well. Google News. The other way I might do this in a classroom would be to do a four corners activity. So this is Google Drawings. Again, Google Drawings doesn't get enough use. So you could do this physically or on a graphic organizer type format. You can put your statement in the center here, and then we're asking them, do they agree? So we could, yes, they agree because X. They might agree if this, they don't agree because this, and they might have a question they wish to ask. So it's just another way of using Google tools to encourage that criticality, that perspective taking, that ability to see and recognize other people's views. Okay, there's further examples in the presentation of how I'm using Google tools in the classroom around this. So for example, I've got a slide here where I've given the students a blank, a kind of format in slide 1, and then they have created the work in these further slides based on the instructions in slide 1. So it's a nice collaborative tool. But then in the slide notes, in the speaker notes section, I've created this kind of little structure for self-evaluation and peer evaluation, which works really nicely. I would also frequently use Google Forms. My area of responsibility in the senior school includes looking at our PHSE provision, which we're using a range of Google tools to present, and I will always run a Google Forms self-review at the close of that to encourage them to think about their thinking. Okay, so lots more resources, things to look at, little things that I use through the presentation that might be of use or interest. You're very, very welcome to get in touch with me if you want to kind of hang out, share ideas, come and see what we're doing. Ian, is that all right? Do we have questions?
Yes, Laura, there's, as you've been going through the presentation, then there's been lots and lots of positive comments. People have been reminding them that thank you, Laura, for reminding about Google News. Great for sort of English language students, and lots of comments about using text tools in docs and other bits and pieces like that. So I think what you've done is really help just remind everybody that Google tools, including things like Google Keep, You know, they're great tools and very versatile tools that can be used in so many ways. The trouble is, unless you have a practitioner who shows you in context how those tools can be used, then sometimes people's focus gets boxed in onto the sort of standard things. So I think you've been able to help share some really good ideas.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, absolute pleasure. And I think really the takeaway from my school, from our own embracing this project, is that you need training. You can't underestimate the importance of training. People have plenty of time, one-to-one, small groups, just to get hands-on with tools and explore and develop their own usage in a way that works for them.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I know it's a sort of shameless plug, Laura, but do you want to just let everybody know about the course that's running at your school?
Oh, yes, thank you. That's really kind of you. Yeah, we're going to have a googly day here, probably with quite a strong focus on thinking skills, because it's a real core interest of ours. It's going to be on June the 12th here at St Catherine's in Surrey. You're very, very welcome to join us, and we'll perhaps manage to put a link in the comments in a second, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, we'll make sure that everybody gets access to that, because it's a great opportunity to go and spend some time face to face with Laura and Andy Caffrey and others, learning more about how these tools are being used in schools. So, Laura, again, on behalf of everyone who's listening from all over the country, thank you very much for taking the time out on this snowy day to share your good practice, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Right. Okay. So hopefully that's given everybody some more ideas and thoughts about how, whether it's Google Docs or Google Slides, how all these tools can be used in context with the teaching and learning challenges that you have. And we will make sure that Laura's additional slides are shared with everybody. So we've got 2 more sessions before we finish this morning. So thank you very much for staying with us. My colleague Paul Farrell is going to do a short session now on creating custom maps. There were some questions earlier on about how do you create maps and how do you share maps with students. So Paul, the floor is yours on creating custom maps.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ian. So here I am in a map that I've created earlier, and we're going to look at all the functionality that comes with these custom maps. But before I do that, just one thing, just quickly, it's been really interesting listening to everybody else talk. And as I was going through, I was struck by how much of what Ian said at the beginning has been exemplified in what Des and Matt and Laura have done. So we've seen clear examples of scaffolding, we've seen clear examples of collaboration, and seen clear examples of feedback, which is fantastic. That we've said these are the things that students want, students value, which is what Ian said at the beginning from their surveys, and there are practitioners in the classroom delivering precisely that. So that was brilliant to see. Nothing to do with the maps, but I just thought it was an observation that was worth sharing. Okay, so how do you get to my maps? The easiest way is just to do a search for my maps. Just one word, my maps, in the search bar, and then the top hit is nearly always Google Maps. That will take you there to a screen. I'll invite you to get started, assuming you're already logged in. Click login, and you might not have quite so many maps as I have, and you might not have any, but this is where all your own personalized maps will appear. Okay, so a search for my maps will get you there. So that's the first thing. So here's one that I made earlier in true Blue Peter style, and we're going to just go through some of the functionality that you can use. So this is located near me because I'm here in Leicester. And we're going to start assuming that we're going to be doing a local history piece of work, looking at buildings and places of interest around the area. So this could be a PSEG task, it could be a geography task, it could be a history task. And I've done a search for Leicester Cathedral, and I'm going to say I want to add that to my map. And there we go. We've now got a pin right in the centre of Leicester, directly over the top of Leicester Cathedral. And you'll notice that the screen that's jumped up has given me some options. I can change the colour of the pin, I can edit it, I can add photos, and so on and so forth. I can delete it, of course. So I'm going to add photos. Now, these could be photos that your students take. I mean, I'm going to stop. I can't type and speak at the same time. Or it could be ones that they do a search for. And you see here, I've just gone insert image and going to Google image. They could have gone upload and uploaded their own pictures. So we'll take a few images and add them in there. You'll notice that because it's a known location, I've also got a link to its address and its website and so on and so forth. That gets put in automatically. Let's add a few more. A picture from inside, which would be nice. I'll do one more just so you can see a summer's day. That will do lovely. Okay, so in the preview version of this map now, when people go to see it, when they click on that link, they get a little slideshow. I'll just, oh, sorry, oversensitive mouse. They get a little slideshow of the three slides, that the three images that you put in there. So it allows people to see either your own work or the work of your search and the photograph that you've used. Okay, so I'm going to save that now. Okay, so that's the first thing. Okay, Matt mentioned earlier about doing routes, and you can put routes in there. You can, and what he did is he added directions. So because I've already got one place in here, let's assume I'm going from Leicester Cathedral, and I'm going to go to Victoria Park. I will put Leicester in because there are lots. Oh, they just put it for me there. Look, because there are lots of Victoria Parks around the country, understandably, and it's immediately put in a route from A to B, showing me where I might get. So you can add directions into it, and you'll notice he's adding an extra layer here, just for that map. And so if I don't want to see that, I can turn that off. It still remains, but I can turn it off if I want to look at other things. Okay, so let's go to Victoria Park, and let's assume I want to do some work working out the size of Victoria Park. So I'm going to draw a line around Victoria Park. So it gives me the option of a number of options. I'm going to draw a line or a shape, and I can prescribe a line around Victoria Park and add it to the join it. There we go. So I've now made a shape that gives me the size, and you'll notice that the pop-up now shows me the hectareage and the perimeter of that shape. So you've got an idea of the size of the shape. As before, I can add images. I can do a search and add some images, and there's the Lutyens Cenotaph Memorial, which is very beautiful. Come on. Where's it gone? Why did it not add it? I select it and miss the button. There we go. I must have missed the button. I apologize for that. So you can all mix different pieces. You can see I can do exactly the same with the shapes that I can do with other items that are popped into the field, which is really very useful. Okay. And as I'm down in Victoria Park, let's just then take an example of plotting a route myself. Because I've done a shape and it's given me the perimeter and it's given me the hectares. If I do another one, let's just say I'm a student living in Cecilia Road, and I want to know how far it is from my, oops, wait, there we go, from my house to my school. And again, this time rather than the shape, it's a line, and it gives me the distance that I travel. And again, I can do photographs, add images, I can edit it in any way. I can also add the information that I need. This might be about, you know, how do people travel and all those kinds of things. So it allows me to make a whole series of lots of different pieces of information that I can share with my classmates and so on and so forth. Okay, so that then brings me to sharing. Sharing is slightly different. Sharing is normally up in the top right hand corner, isn't it? That big blue button. On a map, it's in this interface here, look. So there's my share button. And it works exactly the same as it does with anything else. So you can share by group, you can send them an email message, you can share by individuals, you can allow them to edit, or you can allow them to view only. You can also, if this was a map with just the school's location on it, for example, you could make this public on the web, set it so that people can view it. So you could then insert that map onto a website so that people can find their way to your school a bit easier. Okay, and you've got all the scale of ranges in between. I'm going to leave that as it is for the moment so you can see all this. And I'm going to cancel the sharing. I don't need to do any more sharing. Okay, so we've looked at the buttons up here. We can just add a pin. So I've selected pin at the top, selected add. Give it a name, and then as before, can add pictures, can edit it, can add text, and so on and so forth. Okay, so people can add their own individual pins. So you could have a situation where each student is shared in with this map. They each add the location of their house, and then they each add the route that they take to school. And they can be enormously accurate in that. So if they nip out to see someone pick up their friend down another road, actually that little detour to pick up their friend can be shown. It shows them the precise distance that they walk. They can be enormously accurate. And for them to all be able to see each other's routes and how they all mix and match and coalesce is actually a really interesting task for them to do, and look at how many people walk and how many people take cars or get the bus or whatever it happens to be. Okay, so that's a really nice little activity that you can do within history or geography or whatever. Geography rather. So I've talked about the directions. The other two key areas that are worth looking at is first look at the base map. You can decide what type of map you have. You might have thoughts about some of these. Some of them I think are just too pale to be useful. The satellite image is actually very useful because it puts a very different flavour. You know, you as a geographer can now see that there are very complex rows of very large rows of terraces in this area, which immediately tells you something about it. And you can see that as you move further away from the city towards the bottom right hand corner, we move away from terraces and much more into detached and semi-detached properties. So you can see the way the buildings change. So there's work to be done there within the geography thing. You can see where there's green space and so on and so forth, and all sorts of different buildings and rooms and things. Okay, and then there's a kind of a standard kind of a terrain map, which you can't really see very well. But if I zoom out a little bit, you should be able to see. You can start now to see the shading that shows you information about the topology of the area. So you can see where the hills and the things. If I go over to Wales, we'll see that a bit better. There we go. Look, you're going to see some bigger mountains now. Okay, so you've got a base map, so you can customize it and decide how it looks. I tend to stick with that one because it kind of suits me best, but you can make that decision yourself about which is the one that suits you best. Okay, the other thing I've done is I've added layers, and I've got 3 layers here, 4 layers, the original layer and 3 extra ones. You've seen the directions, yeah. And I can click on that and it'll take me straight to those directions back into the center where we were originally. But I've got 2 others here which actually allow you to start to layer things on top of each other and compare and contrast. So I can turn them on or off. So there is a link to all the theatres in the area, and you can click on each one and it'll tell you which one it is. I didn't add any pictures of these, but I did a search for theatres in Leicester and then went through and added each one of them. So if I just, for example, put PC World in Leicester, okay, you'll see they come up as green dots. I'm told I said yellow dots earlier and got told off. I'm a colorblind person. Apparently they're green. And when you found the things that you want to find, can you see here I've got an add to map? So you can do just a simple search within the map, find the things you want to add in and add them in. So those could be restaurants, those could be charity shops, those could be, so if you're doing a kind of a buildings usage investigation for geography, then you can actually, you won't necessarily find them all, but you'll find a very substantial number of them by doing a search that way. Okay, I'm not going to add those in for the moment. So that's the other thing you can do. But then the other ones that I've added in, you'll see I've added in the theatres. If I go back into if I zoom back in, you can see them a bit better. You can see the theatres in Leicester, yeah. And then you can also say, well, I also want to see all the car parks. Okay, perhaps I should have chosen a different picture for that. I'm going to choose a different colour for that one, so you can see there's a difference. A bit easier to see with the thing. So you can see that, not by coincidence, that the theatres are located close to car parks, or car parks are located close to theatres. Not always. There's a very large shopping centre on the left here, where these three large ones are. But you can see that decisions about locations of property and their usage is based on facilities around it. So it's actually a really useful conversation to have for that geography teacher, to say, well, here's what is available to you. Here are the tools that we can do to find it out. Okay. So we've covered that. In the sent map, you've also got a simple ruler where you can literally just work out either direct routes. Yeah, but that line doesn't stay. The minute you click again, it disappears. But you can do some measuring. So you could actually, if we went in close, yeah, you can do some quite fine measuring of distances of parts of a map and so on and so forth. So you've got the option to do that should you want to. Okay. So I think that a quick fly through, but I think we're kind of more or less there now. Ian, anything else that people wanted to know? Any questions that have come up whilst I've been chatting?
I think, Paul, that's been an excellent just insight into the power of Google Maps. I certainly wasn't aware, or if I was, I'd forgotten that wonderful little example you did of the boundary of the park. But I'm sure that lots of people will be thinking, yes, maybe I could go to a map of Cairo and start measuring the size of the Great Pyramid there using the ruler or whatever else. So if you take what you've done in conjunction with some of the other presentations that have been given this morning, then I think it's just another example of there are some really useful tools and services within the Google system, and we need to just remind ourselves from time to time how powerful they can be. And one of the nice bits of feedback from Bob was it is actually an excellent tool for curating content, and the possibility of importing locational data from tables such as earthquake patterns. And then, because we had that wonderful earthquake recently in the UK, based down in South Wales, and how many people across the country actually felt something on that day. So great example of how
there might also be some maps out there that already do that people will allow you to share. I know there's a Beatles map, for example, because my brother's obsessed with the Beatles. So there are a number of ready-made maps out there that people will share with you and give you data that already exists, that might save you a bit of work, which would be quite
No, that's great. So thank you very much, Paul, on behalf of everybody, for sharing those bits. And one other comment was perfect timing, because it's going to be used by Jerry with his year 7s before they go on their geography tips. So much appreciated. So, ladies and gentlemen, to bring this morning's prep session to a close, it's my pleasure to introduce Rowan McNichol. Rowan's the head of digital literacy down at Sevenoaks Prep School, and I had the privilege to visit Rowan at the school briefly, sort of only last week. And Rowan's going to share with us some examples of how VR resources are being used to support deeper learning. So with the title of Virtual Reality for Everyone, Rowan, the floor is yours. You can share your screen.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ian. So hopefully now my screen should show up. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see that.
Oh, good stuff. Right, super. So yeah, thank you for the introduction, Ian. Yeah, so my name's Ronan McNichol, and I'm working in Sevenoaks Prep School in Kent. The school's been closed the past couple of days, back open today tentatively. but we're sort of struggling with the winter weather here at the moment. Virtual reality has been a passion of mine for some years, and it's a very exciting technology. Whether you want to call it virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, I think they're essentially, with sort of the technical differences aside, they all represent, I suppose, a goal as educators in what we want to achieve in the classroom, which is immersion, which is sort of bringing pupils sort of closer to experiencing and almost feeling what they're learning about, as opposed to looking at pictures in a book. Google have been doing some fantastic work to make virtual reality as accessible as possible. They have a lot of platforms for accessing content which is free, and they've been making a huge effort to kind of bring that out into as many schools as possible with programs such as their sort of virtual reality expeditions program last year, and more recently what they've launched in America, which will hopefully make its way here across the Atlantic as well, which is augmented reality expeditions. To sort of start off with, I think the introduction of Google Cardboard headsets was a game changer, because it allowed a lot of people to gain their first experience of virtual reality. Prior to that, it was something that was quite theoretical. You would only see some headsets, university labs, and suddenly, the New York Times were giving away cardboard headsets for free, and suddenly there was a lot of buzz around virtual reality, and Google sort of really opened doors for people to realize that they could just slide in a smartphone and enter a virtual world. So the cardboard headset itself is essentially just a template, cardboard, lenses, you sort of fold it up. All the processing and all the work is really done by the device that you put into it. And one of the apps that Google developed was Expeditions, which is an absolutely fantastic free app that's available on different platforms, Android, iOS. It can be used not only on smartphones, it can be used on iPads and other tablet devices as well. And it's absolutely brilliant. It's a great entry point for any teacher, any school interested in virtual reality, interested in offering their pupils a chance to kind of learn about places that they might not visit, or they just want to sort of give the pupils a chance to almost see and experience what they're learning about and talking about. So we've been using Expeditions in my current school for some time now across different age ranges, but also it's being used in lots of schools because it is an easy to access platform with hundreds upon hundreds of different expeditions that teachers can choose from. We've used it right the way down with our year 1 pupils who were using it to explore a rainforest as part of a sort of a wow introduction into their sort of big topic for this term. We've used it at the top end of the school with year 6, 7, and 8 students using ViewMaster virtual reality headsets with iPod touches inside. It can be used in many different ways, but the key is that it really does sort of get pupils excited about learning again. The first time you experience this with students, you'll see they have a real buzz for learning. They're excited and they're looking around, and it really does bring your topic to life. So I'll just share with you a little video now of Expeditions, which is from the UK Roadshow last year.
My name is Ty and I'm 11 years old. I I can hold my breath for 18.9 seconds. Because one day, when I grow up, I want to be a deep sea diver. I want to explore the Pacific Ocean. But I haven't been for a swim in the sea yet. Today at school, something really fun happened.
Morning, class.
Miss took us on a school trip.
Today's lesson is exploring the world's oceans.
But this wasn't a normal school trip.
Can we collect one of these viewers and look inside?
Whoa! That is amazing.
Who spotted a shark?
We visited the Great Barrier Reef in Australia.
Wow, we're swimming towards it. There's a massive one there. Okay, what can you see?
There's a turtle.
Are we ready for an adventure?
Yeah. That is massive. That's a lot of fish.
So hopefully that video gives you a bit of an idea as to how the platform works. A teacher has a tablet device and manages and runs the entire expedition. Pupils join that expedition, but the teacher remains in control and can sort of guide and show students around different scenes, make annotations. There's a lot that can be done with it. So as well as expeditions, there are also YouTube 360 videos that Google publish. So if I can just open up here and briefly to give you an idea of the cost of a cardboard headset. I mean, you can pick them up on Amazon for £5–10. They are pretty cheap. I think this approach can work very easily for secondary schools if pupils are given permission to bring mobile phones in. The devices that are compatible with Google, well, with virtual reality in any case, is the devices need to have a gyroscope or potentially an accelerometer. But providing they meet sort of those basic specifications, then students could bring their own device in. For primary schools, though, we have also used expeditions quite successfully inside VR headsets. I mentioned before you can use expeditions on iPads without obviously needing to do anything. But if you do want to approach it from the point of view of putting it inside a headset, for primary schools, the Viewmaster headset works very successfully because it's just a little bit more rugged, and the cost comes in around, you can see here, £20, but sometimes you get discounts around £13–15. I think these work quite successfully for primary schools. And in that case, obviously, you won't have a bank of mobile phones like secondary schools might have if they allow pupils to bring them in for these sort of projects. And in a primary school situation, it may be more appropriate to purchase like a low-cost device, like there's a Nokia phone that works, which Ian could share more about later, for under £100. And also, you know, we've used iPod Touches quite successfully. Not cheap, but again, if you can build up a bank, it can really make a difference right the way down into nursery classrooms, because students just absolutely love these kind of experiences. It gets them excited about learning. So returning then to YouTube 360, I mean, YouTube, there's a huge collection of virtual reality videos on there, and you can sort of scroll through and find different videos that might match in with some of your topics. But also, you know, I just picked one out to share with you here. These are videos that can then be opened up on headsets and can create a lovely opportunity for students to to experience virtual reality, even without having a headset. Just using my desktop screen here, you can sort of move around in 3D, which is very powerful, because it's it's how the world obviously exists. So I think this really, as a form of storytelling, this is really where journalism and where media is headed, because that's the world we live in. It's more natural. So if you do have, of course, a virtual reality headset, then you could look at that stereoscopically. So in other words, just look at it by sort of moving your head around with the headset on. So as you sort of move around,
away from the pride,
you can sort of see it's a YouTube video from National Geographic,
who has already lost a brother.
But it's allowing you to move around as well to kind of get a much deeper sense of the environment that you're actually in. It really creates that immersion. So there are a lot of different YouTube 360 videos there, and it's a case of just hunting through and finding different videos that might match your topics. We've used these videos with Year 1 students who are learning about African safari animals. Google Spotlight Stories is another platform that I've only really recently learned about. Ian mentioned he visited my school. He was sharing these Google Spotlight Stories with me, and I think these look very exciting, because they are extremely well designed stories in 360, much like YouTube 360 videos, but could be very useful for helping students learn sort of different aspects of empathy by sort of being immersed in the story, as opposed to sort of learning about a story passively. So, for example, Pearl is one that's sort of been very well received. Each sort of video, when you go to the Google Spotlight Stories webpage, each story will have a little description. You can download these, again, for Android through Google Play or the App Store. And you can sort of also just enjoy them without actually using a virtual reality headset. So in the case of Pearl, just like the previous video we looked at, if you don't actually have a headset, you can sort of navigate around. And that creates a really powerful medium for students to kind of learn about empathy and also improve their sort of richer understanding, and help them achieve a richer understanding of the environment they're learning about. So that's definitely also worth a look, and hopefully we'll see even more stories added to this as time goes along. And whilst the sort of the headset approach is fantastic, because the Google Cardboard headset approach is fantastic because it can allow a lot of students to experience virtual reality. Sort of the more expensive platforms like HTC Vive and the mixed reality headsets, and of course Google Daydream's headset. These approaches are, of course, where we want to see the technology move in the coming years and become more accessible for students in classrooms, because they really allow for a deeper form of learning with virtual reality. So with these high quality headsets, the experiences can be multi-sensory by incorporating spatial audio, by having a higher resolution, and also then the incorporation of haptics and touch. And we're really aiming for students to experience what they're learning. Experiential learning is quite an interesting study and thing to learn about. It has its roots in constructivism. It's where students are You know, it's proven that they can learn more effectively when they are experiencing their learning and not just reading about it passively or through rote learning. And I think virtual reality has huge potential here because it's obviously all about immersing students in an environment so that they hopefully, once, you know, they sort of are in the rainforest, they can sort of, it creates that simulated environment where they can sort of move leaves apart and see what animals and learn all about the flora and fauna of the environment they're in, as opposed to just reading about it in a book. I think it's incredibly exciting. And of course, the very nature of it being an immersive experience. And then another important aspect of virtual reality is that we start to draw out the emotional side of the experience. So we're looking to build empathy. We want our students to engage emotionally with these experiences. Some of the richer headsets, like the HTC Vive, for instance, do that now. They allow students to they actually believe that they have seen the Titanic pass by them, as opposed to it being something like, you know, it was like the Titanic pass. They actually forget where they're at, and they're in that world for a period of time. So Google have been doing some great work as well in the sort of providing tools if you're lucky enough to have a higher end VR headset. So Tilt Brush is quite low cost. It's an incredibly exciting tool, and it'll show you a little video of that in action in a moment. As well as Google Earth VR, allowing students to move around, fly around, visiting different places. If you have the broadband connection, that's incredibly powerful for humanities teachers or just any teacher who is teaching about different locations. And finally, Google Blocks, almost like an extension of Tilt Brush. It's a fantastic tool for allowing students to design in their own sandbox environment. So I'm going to show you a video. It's from my previous school, Jess Dubai, who are kind enough to allow me to share this video with you today. It's a school I worked in last year alongside a colleague, Steve Bambury. We did a lot of work with his HTC Vive, and Tilt Brush was one particular app that we seen huge potential, and not just potential, actual. We found that the students were able to realize their artistic ideas using this app very successfully. And it's not something for down the line. It's real, and we can use this technology right now. So I'll share that video with you.
I'm Hannah. I'm a sixth form art student at Just Dubai, and today I'll be using Google Tilt Brush to create a VR version of one of my sculptures for my final exhibition. Virtual reality for my sculpture was I worked a lot with tension to be able to get the shapes and forms that I wanted, and in Tilt Brush, obviously, that didn't have to play a part, so I could just pull the pieces as far as I wanted, and that created a very different result than I'd originally done. It was absolutely amazing just to be able to work with the Tilt Brush and kind of see how my piece would work on a different scale and with like different materials and things like that.
So hopefully that video gave you an idea of how creative students can be in a virtual reality environment. But also the music in the background, it really helps create that atmosphere where they are doing something quite unique, quite special. And it provided that particular student a great medium for expression. If I can just return to my slide deck. So we've kind of had a little look at different approaches to virtual reality, right from the Google Cardboard approach right through to sort of the more expensive platforms. But hopefully you can see Google are doing some great work at providing tools and low-cost tools for all of these platforms. And I mentioned right at the beginning that augmented reality is another area that Google are starting to promote. And I quite like their tagline for this, which is you can go anywhere in VR and see anything in AR. So I'm just going to share one final video with you, which is the promo video for Google's AR Expeditions program that they're currently launching in America.
All right, who wants to see a volcano? 3, 2, 1. Look at that lava, look at that smoke coming out of that. Pretend you're an airplane and fly over the tornado.
That's the top of it. What do you see? These are asteroid meteorites.
We're learning about DNA and genes, things that we can't see. And so the most exciting thing for me with the AR technology was that I could see kids get an aha moment that I couldn't get by just telling them about it.
The minute I saw it pop up on the screen, it made me want to get up and walk to it.
We actually get to turn around and look at things from all angles, so it gave us a nice perspective.
See if you can figure out what that might be based on what you know about the respiratory system.
I got to see where the alveoli branched off, and I could look inside them and see how everything worked, which I never saw before, and it was really, really cool.
Okay, and that just about wraps up my talk. You know, obviously, if you're interested in learning more, you can contact me. My Twitter details are here. But also our host, Ian, will be able to sort of put you sort of in the right direction if you're wondering, how can I get started? How could I, you know, what sort of device should I have if I want to go for the Google Cardboard route? So between us, we can hopefully provide you with any help to sort of, you know, get started with this incredibly exciting and emerging platform for learning. Thank you very much.
Ron, thank you very much for that. Some really powerful sort of examples there, not just theoretical examples, but as Ian knows, where the Spotlight 360 stories have been used to support boys at his school in terms of creative writing. We know how wide expeditions can be used, but it's amazing to see art students preparing their IB art submissions using these technologies already. And I'm sure that many of the people listening to your presentation will be excited about both how AR and VR can actually be embedded into the delivery of teaching and learning in their schools. So again, on behalf of everyone listening, thank you for sharing those great ideas today, and hope it doesn't snow too much more sort of down on those hills around Sevenoaks. So thank you very much, Rowan.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah.
Okay, so Ian, if you're still with us, do you want to just close this morning's session with just a few words? Okay, Ian, you're live. Okay, so I think Ian's struggling to hear us, but on behalf of Ian and everybody at the ISC Digital Strategy Group, I'd like to thank you all for joining us this morning. We hope that you found the presentations by the practitioners very helpful in understanding how many of these tools, which we're all familiar with, are being used to support teaching and learning. Thank you very much for your time. We will provide you links to all the resources that people have shared with us, and we will be looking to get a face-to-face event organized probably later in the sort of June, July time. So with that, we'll bring the session to a close. Hope you all have a successful rest of the day, and be safe in the snow. Okay, bye for now.